struggled with faith.
Hello, wonderful people. This is another special edition of your moment of inspiration. Previously, we've talked about issues like mistakes in life and also how to plan your life to achieve your goals in life. Today, we are talking about how to deal with disappointment. Disappointments, as we all know, are inevitable. They meet us on almost every side of life, whether we are prepared for it or we are not. But I believe it's best that we prepare for it, especially as youth. As we endeavor to do so many things in life, definitely we are going to meet moments whereby we'll be turned down. How do we go through such moments? We have here a very wonderful personality, Pastor Jack Wald. So Wald or Wild?
Wald.
Okay. Pastor Jack Wald. He's a very great personality, and personally I like him for his simplicity. He has achieved so many things in life, yet he's very simple, very close to the youth, and a very inspiring personality. But then I would want you to talk about himself, a brief history about himself. So Pastor, you're welcome to the show. This is your moment of inspiration. First of all, Pastor, can you talk to us about yourself?
Okay, should I be looking at the camera? Or?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let me see, I became a follower of Jesus when I was about 20 or 21 years old. Mm. And I was a university student in Boston in the northeast of the United States. Mm. And I was one of an estimated 14 million Americans that became followers of Jesus in the late 1960s, early 1970s. Mm. And what was a significant revival awakening that took place. And I'd come from a nominally religious family, but where the faith in a relationship with Jesus was something that was really not talked about. So it was a new thing for me when people talked about Jesus as someone with whom I could have a relationship. And I entered into this really remarkable fellowship of students in Boston at Park Street Church. And that was a group that came to be about 600 university graduate age students. And a lot of what I see happening in the Fellowship of Champions here in Morocco reminds me of what our life was like as students in the early 1970s. Mm-hmm. So it's exciting for me to be a supporter of this ministry. Mm-hmm. So when I was studying, majoring in, I started majoring in math, decided I wanted to major in sociology, and then my father suggested, why don't I take my interest in social sciences, my interest in math and science, and study medicine. So I continued as a major, sociology major, but taking the pre-med courses for medical school. And then I'd been a Christian for about a year, and I had a new roommate, and he was also a Christian, and he asked me if I had ever prayed and asked Jesus what he wanted me to do with my life. And so I did. I said I assumed that God would want to use a doctor, and I got this sense when I prayed that I should go to seminary, which I resisted, because seriously, there were a lot of people going into ministry of our group. Yeah. And I said, if everybody's in ministry, who's going to support the ministry? Mm-hmm. So for 3 months, I began making a series of deals with God. I offered increasing percentages of the money that I would earn, and I got up to about 50%. And I still had the sense that I should go to seminary. And so then I began saying, okay, I'll be a missionary doctor in the summers. Mm-hmm. Then finally I played my trump card and I said, okay, I'll be a full-time missionary doctor. And still I had this sense that I should go to seminary. So then it was one morning in December 12th or 17th, I think. And I was waiting for somebody for lunch and I was praying. And I don't remember what I was praying about, but I all of a sudden I said, okay, I give up, I'll go to seminary. Mm-hmm. So I changed my courses. I dropped organic chemistry. I took public speaking because I was not a good public speaker. Okay. And I took creative writing, and I went into seminary. So I was seminary, I got married. We moved to, I was a youth pastor for a year in West Virginia in the center of the United States. And then after that year, I decided to be ordained in the Presbyterian Church. And so I did that. And after having been in ministry for 6.5 years, I felt burned out. I had dreams and ambitions for what I wanted to do, was not seeing those happen. And I just did not want to be a pastor anymore. And I worked with a church history professor who was working for an organization for renewal, working with the renewal elements of all the mainline denominations, including Catholics and Orthodox. But at the end of 6 months, he had health problems, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. And my father asked me if I would work with him in his business, which was manufacturing inks for printing. And so I did that. I started with that, and I ended up working with him for 13 years. And during those 13 years, I wondered, why did God give me such a strong sense of call to go into the ministry when I'm making ink to make labels on the shelves look better so people will buy this product rather than that product? It just didn't make sense. But then in February of 1999, the business was sold. I was 48 years old, and I was too young to retire. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I began exploring working with different ministries, college ministries, university ministries, a ministry of prayer. And then we had a missions conference in our church, and there's a missionary couple that stayed with us who said, you know, there's this church in Rabat, Morocco, looking for a pastor, and I think you'd be a good fit. And I didn't take it seriously because it seemed too exotic to take seriously. But we exchanged emails, and we visited in September of 1999 for 2 weeks. I liked the people. They asked me to come as a pastor, and I came in January 2000. And I tell people these have been the best 17 years of my life. Wow,
that's great. Okay, with regards to what we are talking about today, disappointments in life, what do you call to be a disappointment in life?
Well, as I think about this, you know, if I'm disappointed, why am I disappointed? So, I mean, I dated a girl. I really liked her, and she broke up with me, and I was disappointed. So you don't get what you want.
What you wanted,
And or you apply when a university student comes to Morocco and they apply to study for something, and then when they get assigned to something else, and they're disappointed because they didn't get what they wanted. Or I mean, so all these things, it's always that there's something we want, we don't get it, and we're disappointed. So, and then we sit there and we say, okay, God, why aren't you taking care of me? You know, why aren't you giving me what I want? And it's basically, for me, the question is, who's God? Is God God, or am I God?
Am I God?
So I think almost all disappointments come because we have determined what we want for our lives, and we have become God, and then we pull God into it, and we somehow make God promise us something that He's never promised. There's no promises in the Bible but we take it to be a promise to us. And then we're disappointed and we're angry and frustrated with God because He's not giving us what we want. So I think that there's a very unhealthy dynamic with this whole thing of disappointments.
Okay, so then can we say disappointment is the same as feeling of regret?
No, regret is something different. Regret is when I do something and I wish I hadn't done that. So, you know, I say something I shouldn't have said, I do something I shouldn't have said, or I don't do something that I should have done, or I don't say something I should have said, and then we regret not having done it differently. Disappointment is wanting something and not getting what we want.
Okay, so what are the effects that disappointment has on an individual, like a youth, a young person who wants to get something in life but then hasn't gotten it, as we have rightly said? What are the effects that individual is bound to suffer?
Well, I think that, when you come to a point in life where you want something and you don't get it, you're at a crossroads. And you can either go this way or this way. And I know a person who was married and her husband had problems with his arm and she prayed for it to be healed and it was amputated.
Okay.
And then he was continued to be sick and she prayed that he would get well and he died. So when I met this woman, she told me, I don't really believe in God because I prayed for my husband's healing for his arm. I prayed for healing for his body and it didn't happen. So I don't really think there's a God. So you come to a crossroads and you can decide, what am I going to do about this? Am I going to stay with my frustration, my anger, my bitterness because I didn't get what I want? Or am I going to say, okay, God, you have a plan for my life and I'm trusting you with my life?
Okay. All right. That's wonderful. Pastor, what is the best way to deal with disappointments? What is the best way we can handle disappointment as youth? Because, when we are disappointed, there are so many suggestions that come into our mind. But then how can we rightly deal with the issue of being disappointed in life? When you don't get what we want, what do we do then?
Well, there's a couple thoughts that come to my mind. One is that youth are very impatient.
Okay.
Youth want everything right away. And so it's a difference between a meal at McDonald's and a meal at a good restaurant. At McDonald's, you go in, you get your food right away.
Yeah.
I want this Big Mac, I get my Big Mac.
Fast food. Yeah.
At a good meal, you wait for it to be cooked and it comes to you and it's really delicious, but it takes time.
Yeah.
So, I think youth, when you're young, you want everything to happen right away, and you think if you don't get it right away, that you're never going to get it. But you have to realize that when you're 20 years old, it'll be 40 or 50 years before you retire.
Okay.
And there's a lot of time in there. If you don't get married when you're 25 or 30, you can still get married when you're 35. There's still time, and then there's time to have children. Youth want everything right away. So I think that youth need to be more patient and say, I'm trusting you, God, for what's good for my life. And the second thought is just that Paul certainly had room for a lot of disappointments.
Okay.
He says that but he says, I've learned to be content in all things. Whether I have a lot or whether I have a little, whether I'm hungry, whether I'm full. And he went through horrendous experiences of being beaten, stoned, left for dead, beaten with rods, whipped, flogged. People rejected him, people disappointed him. But he says, I've learned to be content, which means that it wasn't automatic for him, but there was a process over time in which he learned to be content.
Okay.
So how youth deal with disappointment or old people deal with disappointment is to realize that you're on a journey, and in that journey, the Holy Spirit is working in you to transform you.
Exactly.
And all these life experiences are going to be part of the process of changing you. And it's going to be a lifelong process. It's not going to be, I do one thing and now my life is changed. Change in our lives doesn't happen like this. Except in some miraculous way, which is very unusual and very rare. But most change is gradual and it takes time. And I think most times you look back and you realize that you've changed and you didn't realize that you were changing.
Yeah, okay.
So what that comes down to is that you have to stay attached to Jesus. like when Jesus talked about being abiding in me and being attached to the vine. You have to hold on to Jesus, especially in the most disappointing, the most frightening, the most bitter moments of your life.
Okay.
Because when you feel most helpless and most, when you have the most doubt, and you hold on to Jesus, that's when the change takes place. I've often wished that I could lay at home in my hammock and sip some iced tea, listening to some good music, and become a better Christian. To develop, grow in my faith. But the times in my life where I have grown the most have been times that have been the most difficult times in my life. The greatest disappointments for me. And when I hung on to Jesus, despite that, at the end, I discovered that I had grown in faith in those times.
Wow. That's amazing. So then, is there a way of avoiding disappointments? Can we say, okay, let me plan well, let me do this, and I wouldn't be disappointed?
Suicide.
Suicide?
Yeah, if you kill yourself, it's all over. There's no disappointments.
Okay.
But there's also no life. And there's no joy, there's no growth. So I'm not suggesting anybody kill themselves, but I think if you're going to live, you're going to be disappointed.
Okay.
So I don't think there's any way to avoid it. And I don't think that I don't know if I'll say this or not. I was going to say you should not try to avoid disappointments. What I think is you should not avoid being passionate for things. You should not avoid wanting certain things, hoping for things. And when you do that, there will be disappointments. But I think it's like if you have children, you could keep your children inside in a room with rugs and no sharp corners, no glass, so they won't hurt themselves. Because if you let them go out and climb a tree, they'll fall out of a tree and break an arm. But that's what life is like. Life is occasionally falling and breaking your arm. And I think that's you need to live life with passion, with boldness. And because we are not perfect, when we do that, sometimes we make mistakes. But if you're so cautious and so afraid of making mistakes, you're never going to live. So just be bold and passionate, go forward, trust that God will protect you, that the Holy Spirit will work with you. You're going to make mistakes, but you're also going to do some really good things in the process. So I think the idea of trying to avoid or not have disappointments is in a way saying that you're not going to live.
Okay. Sometimes we are advised not to set high expectations as youth, because if you set high expectations, then you're going to be disappointed. You're going to be, So then we are not going to set high expectations for ourselves. And how do we become great?
When I was a youth pastor, or not a youth pastor, I was a young pastor in Ohio, and there was a young man named Jim who was an excellent guitarist, really good at guitar. And his dream was to be a rock star. And we met every week, and we had long conversations. And it basically became clear to him that he had to choose to follow Jesus or to be a rock star. One of these was going to be his God, either Jesus or being a rock star. And he chose God. And he ended up getting a master's degree in classical guitar, and he teaches guitar now and has, I think, 6 or 7 children. And actually introduced his wife to him. But so I think that the say to have. People say, take a dream and just fix your eyes on it and make that happen. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that. On the other hand, I want people to think that they can do great things. But when the great thing that you want to do becomes more important to you than serving Jesus, serving God, following Jesus, that's the problem. So there's a young man from this who came here to this church for a few years, and he's working now in Ireland, and he's an entrepreneur, and he speaks at conferences, and he's meeting with a lot of top level billionaires, and doing amazing things.
Yeah.
Another couple kids from this church have a business, and they take photo booths to places, and then they take high level photography of those places. It's some kind of a concept they've developed, and they're becoming incredibly successful. And so I think it's wonderful when people step out and they have ambition and drive and determination to be successful. Another Ebenezer in our church from years past went back to Ghana, and he's working to make films.
Wow.
He has great dreams of being a filmmaker.
Okay.
That's important. It's important to have those dreams.
Okay.
But when you get off balance, if you start to make that your God, so you need to have high ambitions and dreams. Think great thoughts, great things. What can you do? But it has to be grounded in your relationship with God and the understanding that you're here in this life, passing through as a pilgrim. Everything that you accomplish is going to be left behind. You're going to enter into eternity with only your faith that you have accumulated in this life. So you have to have that understanding that grounds you as you work in this life to do something that's successful and use it in a way that brings glory to God. So it's not as simple as saying yes or no to should I set high dreams for myself, because I think yes, but be careful that you have a good grounding that protects you from making that dream your God.
Okay. So then in your life, as you were growing, taking risks, taking opportunities and here and there, can you share with us at what moment in your life that you felt so disappointed, and what did you do in that moment?
I don't know, disappointed. It's I know when I was in the process of selling the business that this was probably one of the most stressful times in my life.
Okay.
There was a weekend in Chicago. There was a trade show, and we were finalizing the contract, and the contract was about this thick. And I had one lawyer, and the company that was buying my company had 15 lawyers. And I read through this contract probably 10 or 12 times. Just every line, and just trying to understand it, and so we were trying to finalize that. I needed to get some of the employees to make an agreement to share what they knew with this new company, and then my mother's sister had died, and there was a very difficult emotional, a lot of unhealthy family dynamics were coming out, so that was really stressful. My niece was getting married, so there was another set of emotional things going on. And all of this was happening at the same time. And I was just holding on for dear life to Jesus and just praying as I went through this time. So in any situation, basically my answer is, you need to express your anger, you need to express your bitterness, you need to express any emotion you have. Because to hold it inside and try to pretend that you're this wonderful Christian works against anything good spiritually that can happen. But you read the Psalms, and the Psalms express their bitterness and their. And there was one psalm that's very creative in thinking of all the different ways that their enemy could be punished to have a miserable life. And so these psalms, you express all of that, and then when you get it all out, then God can come in and begin to build life into you. So that's a situation, when I worked with the Village of Hope, the home for abandoned children, I was chairman of the board. I'd worked with them for 10 years. And then in March 7th or 8th of 2010, the government abruptly changed their policy, deported all the foreigners, and took the children away from us.
Oh.
And that was a time when I felt I lost my ability to trust God. And I was growing up with Elliot, who's the leader of the student ministry, and we drove up to Tangiers to talk with a student who was having problems. And there was one other student with us, and we stopped at a restaurant to eat, and I couldn't say grace because I didn't. When I say grace, I'm putting my trust in God, and I couldn't do that. I didn't have it.
As a pastor?
Yeah. Pastors are only people.
People. Okay.
And it was a really slow process, and I preached each Sunday talking about what I was experiencing because I wanted people to.
Yeah.
I wanted to be transparent. I wanted people to learn how I went through the process, and it took time for me to develop my confidence, my trust in God again. And it was after going through this experience, I sent a newsletter update to people who support my ministry. And 3 or 4 people wrote back and said, "It sounds like you've grown a lot in faith." Oh. And I responded, "If I did, it wasn't intentional." I mean, all I did was hang on to Jesus and refuse to let go.
Yeah.
And so that's really, my advice is so simple.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing complicated about it. It's just don't let go of Jesus no matter how disappointed you are, no matter how much doubt you have, no matter how much disappointment you have, no matter how angry you are. Express everything you're feeling, but don't let go of Jesus. That's really the answer.
That's amazing.
I mean, you look at the difference between Judas and Peter.
Yeah.
So Peter and Judas both denied Jesus. And Peter denied, and so both failed Jesus. And Peter was willing to come back to Jesus with his shame, with his humiliation, and Jesus restored him to life, and to ministry, leadership. And Judas was bitter, wept bitter tears for what he had done to Jesus. But he wasn't willing to come to Jesus with his bitterness, he wasn't willing to hold on to Jesus, and he ended his life. And I think that's a choice. That's a choice. You know, we can take the way of Peter, take the way of Judas. That even in our most bitter moments, we hang on to Jesus and come back and just not let go.
Okay. Is there any special advice that you have for the youth of today? As we go through, disappointments, is there any special advice that you have for us?
No, not more than what I've said, I don't think, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, then I think it's been very wonderful having Pastor Jack here with us here. But then what I also want to say is a quote by Henry David Thoreau. He says that if we will be quiet and ready enough, we shall find compensation in every disappointment that we go through. And I think, just as you rightly said, most of the times, we the youth of today, what we lack is the patience to go through disappointment. All the time, we want to hasten the process. You told us it's quite a process of learning. You go through one step here and there and that and that. But what we want is instant gratification. The fact that we are disappointed, we want to get out of the whole thing, and that leads to a whole lot of other issues that complicates the matter. So we've learned a lot today. And what I also want to say or share with my viewers is that as youth, when we go through certain moments where, we feel like life has been unfair to us, we have to take our time. We have to, be open. We have to understand that in life, we are definitely going to be disappointed. And when we get disappointed, it's not because God is angry with us, or it's not because God does not love us. He said he loves us. His love for us remains the same. But then in times of disappointment, in times of pain and sorrow, that is when we are supposed to cling to him, like Pastor rightly said, that we have to cling to him, and we are going to see the love of God, expressed in various ways. When one door closes, another door opens. But then how do you see the open door when you are all focusing on the door that is closed? So I think as youth, we have to be, open-minded. We have to know that we wouldn't get all that we want when we need it. And when certain things block, what we want, we have to make sure that God, in one way or the other, is directing our steps to other opportunities. So, Pastor, thank you very much for coming.
Okay.
It's been wonderful having you here,
Right.
and I believe our viewers have enjoyed this show. Thank you very much, and may God bless you. This has been your moment of inspiration. Thank you.